The day they abandoned me for vacation was the day I chose myself. Their texts were weapons, their indifference a bruise I'd learned to hide. But waking alone after surgery peeled back every excuse I ever made for them. When I finally closed the door, literally and legally, the silence that followed was louder than their guilt, and the life that replaced them was nothing like the one I left behind. Hi, I'm Jess, 31, and the day my family chose Cabo over my surgery was the day I learned you can be related to people who'd forget you on an operating table without losing a minute of vacation time. It started with one text. Not dramatic, not poetic, not begging. Hey, my surgery's on the 12th. Just need someone to drive me home. Shouldn't be more than an hour. Send. 5 seconds later, 5. My sister Amber replied, "Lowell, you actually thought we'd miss Cabo for that." Like my medical procedure was a punchline for her 200K Instagram followers. Then my mom, never one to let someone else be the villain alone, chimed in, "Don't guilt us. This trip's been planned for months." And that was it. 2 messages, 2 little digital hand grenades I swear I could feel detonate in my chest. I stared at the screen, felt 17 years of swallowed resentment crawl up my throat, and typed the only thing I had left. My mistake. 2 words that, if you listened closely, sounded suspiciously like a door clicking shut. Because here's the thing, this wasn't the first time I'd been the family safety net. I'd bailed Amber out so many times I should have been able to claim her as a dependent on my taxes. I'd given my mom my half of Dad's insurance payout to save her house while Amber spent hers on a self-healing retreat in Tulum. Years of bending until I cracked. Years of being the strong one, which in our family was code for the one we can drain. So I scheduled an Uber for after the surgery, packed my meds, cleaned my apartment so I wouldn't trip over anything on painkillers, prepared. Because I always did. Surgery day came. No texts from them. Not even a thumbs-up emoji. Amber did post a bikini pic captioned, "Manifesting health, wealth, and sunshine," which felt like the universe's least subtle joke. I woke up from anesthesia nauseous and alone. The nurse held my hand while I threw up. She looked at me. Really looked. "You didn't have anyone to pick you up?" "They had other plans," I whispered. She didn't push. Just handed me crackers like they were dignity in foil packaging. I Ubered home, slept, healed, alone. 3 days later, the hospital called. "Your mother was trying to reach you," the nurse said. "We assured her your surgery went well and that you'd gone home via Uber." Apparently, that single sentence flipped their beloved Cabo trip upside down, because within minutes, my phone exploded. "Mom, why didn't you tell us you were alone?" Amber, "Wait, you actually went through with it alone?" I feel kinda bad now. Not bad, but like, you should have said something if you were desperate. Desperate. Funny how a word that small can hit like a slap. I didn't respond. I archived the chat. I went back to resting. I thought the worst was behind me. But the real fallout, the one that would end Cabo, end the excuses, and the entire way my family operated, hadn't even started yet. When my phone lit up with an incoming FaceTime from Amber the next morning, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so massive it deserved its own gravitational pull. I let it ring out. She called again, and again. On the 4th try, I answered. Her face popped up on the screen. Sunburned nose, braids with tiny beads, that post-vacation glow people get when they've spent 3 days pretending their problems are decorative. "Hey," she said, in the tone people use when they're about to pretend they are the victim. "Why didn't you answer earlier?" "Because I didn't want to." She blinked. Amber wasn't used to me telling the truth raw. She liked her Jess filtered, soft, accommodating, agreeable as wet bread. She sighed dramatically. "Look, I didn't realize you were going alone. I thought you had, I don't know, friends, or neighbors, or like, the nurse?" It was a surgery, I said. People usually have family there. Technically, she muttered, rolling her eyes. But you're fine now, right? My eyebrows nearly detached and fled the room. She kept going. Anyway, I talked to Mom and, we might come home early, tomorrow. The vibes here are off. Because of my surgery? She shrugged. And Mom's upset. She keeps saying we look like monsters. Dramatic, but whatever. There was a beat. A long one. Then I leaned closer to the camera and said, very clearly, "You don't need to come back." Amber froze. Her tan face went flat. "Wait, what?" "I don't need anything from you," I said, and hung up. She called back. I blocked her. It felt quiet afterward. Quiet in a way that felt like oxygen. But then came the knock. My mother. I opened the door, stitches pulling at my abdomen. She stood there looking like someone had told her the world's most inconvenient truth. Purse clutched, makeup smudged, eyes glossy in that way people get when they're not sure if they're sad or just embarrassed. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "You did." She broke right there, on my welcome mat, in my doorway like grief had finally found her address. I let her cry, let her stand in the mess she helped build. When she finally stepped inside, she looked around my living room like she'd never seen it before, like she didn't recognize the life of the daughter she'd assumed would always bend for her. "Jessie," she started, "I had no idea you were completely alone." "You had every idea." Her jaw twitched. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it without telling us more. You didn't say it was serious." "I told you the date. I told you I needed a ride. That was the message." She opened her mouth, closed it. Amber said, "LOL." Silence fell between us so heavy I felt the couch sink under it. "It's just, you've always been so strong," she murmured. No," I corrected gently. "I've always been quiet. That's not the same thing." Her eyes welled again. For the first time in a long time, she looked unsure. Small, like she'd suddenly realized she only knew the version of me that served her. Where do we go from here?" she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment. "I don't know, but not back." And with that, the ground under our family shifted, cracked, really. A fracture that had been waiting years to break open finally did. But the real earthquake? That walked up my driveway the next day, wearing overpriced leggings and a look of entitlement so strong it deserved its own theme music. I heard the pounding before I saw her. 5 solid minutes of open up, the kind of knocking reserved for debt collectors and angry exes. By the time I shuffled to the door, stitches aching, I already knew who it was. Amber. Still in her airport sweats, designer sunglasses perched on her head like she thought TSA was watching. Her expression was a cocktail of irritation, concern, and, "How dare you inconvenience my life by having feelings?" The moment I cracked the door, she wrinkled her nose. "God, you look like hell." "Thanks," I said. "Surgery does that." She pushed her way halfway into the doorway like she owned the hinge. "Look, this got blown way out of proportion, okay? I didn't mean to sound like a..." "A what?" I asked. "A person who laughs at her sister needing a ride home from the hospital." She rolled her eyes. "I was joking. I thought you had people, friends, nurses, someone." "I asked you," I reminded her. She exhaled like I was the dramatic one. "Jess, you know how important that trip was. It was comped, a brand deal. I had to post content." And there it was, the thesis of her entire personality. Amber didn't have family. Amber had props. "I was in a hospital bed," I said flatly. "And I apologized," she fired back. "What more do you want from me?" I stared at her. Really stared. This woman with my father's eyes and absolutely none of his heart. "I want you to admit it," I said, "that you never intended to show up." She tilted her head like I'd asked her to solve a math problem. "I didn't think I had to." There it was, the truth. Amber had never believed she owed me anything. Not time, not effort, not human decency. "You're right," I whispered. "You didn't." She relaxed a little, thinking she'd won. And I don't owe you anything either. Now she looked confused. What's that supposed to mean? I lifted my phone. I reached out to your sponsor. Her face went sheet white. I told them the truth, that you mocked your sister's surgery, skipped out on a family medical emergency, and used their wellness retreat to dodge accountability. I attached screenshots. Amber's voice cracked into a shriek. You didn't. They pulled the campaign. She stumbled, backward, like the air had been punched out of her. You cost me 10 grand. I stepped forward. You cost me 10 years. Her mouth opened, probably to unleash another barrage of denial, but I closed the door before sound could escape. And this time, I kept it shut. My legs were shaking when I leaned against the door. Not with guilt, not even with adrenaline, with relief. Because for the first time in my life, I'd chosen myself over the family mythology of Jess will handle it. Amber wasn't the only one who lost something that day, but I was the only one who gained something back. The house was quiet after the door slammed, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, like peace is finally sitting down beside you after waiting years for an invitation. I sank into my turquoise sofa, still tender from the surgery, and watched afternoon light spill across the floor. It felt strange, liberating, like I was living inside a room that no longer echoed with unpaid emotional invoices. Amber didn't text, didn't call, didn't try to slip a note under the door. Her silence was almost eerie, like she was off calculating her next PR move instead of her next apology. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. 3 days later, an envelope from the clinic arrived. Thin, unassuming. The kind of mail you normally throw on the counter to open later. I slid it open. Inside was one sheet of paper and a check for $312. The letter read, Ms. Martinez, an internal review has confirmed that your insurance plan was accessed for non-medical procedures by a third party. The charges have been reversed and your account refunded. Third party. Translation. Amber had maxed out my insurance. Again. This time for cosmetic procedures. I sat there holding the refund check like it was some twisted trophy. Not because of the money, but because it meant someone other than me finally told her no. That same evening, my mom's texts started. First, can we please talk? Then, I didn't sleep last night. I feel terrible. Then the shift. The emotional boomerang I'd been hit with my whole life. You've always been so distant. I tried so hard to keep peace between you girls. You're making me feel like a failure. Ah, yes. The classic, I'm sorry you feel this way because of me, but it's somehow your fault. So I sent one sentence. If it hurts, it's because the mirror is finally clean. And then I blocked her. For the first time in years, the silence that followed didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like oxygen. 3 weeks passed quietly. I went back to work. My boss, a man made of equal parts gruffness and decency, just said, take whatever time you need, you're solid. More compassion in 8 words than my family managed in a decade. I redecorated, bought a coffee maker, took pottery classes, made a wobbly little mug that somehow had more stability than my family structure ever did. Then came the clinic call. Just a heads up, Jessica, the receptionist said softly. Your mother tried to reassign you as her emergency contact. I laughed, actually laughed. I'd removed myself months ago. After I hung up, I opened my laptop, found a lawyer, and drafted a legal notice severing all financial responsibility for both my mother and Amber. I signed it with a steady hand. Not shaking, not doubting, steady. 2 months later, a message slid into my Facebook inbox from a name I didn't recognize. Hi, I'm Jake, Amber's ex. Dangerous start, right? But I opened it. I know this is random, but I saw what happened. I saw how they reacted, and I think you're the first person who's ever held them accountable. Thank you. You made me feel a little less crazy. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Someone else saw it. Someone else lived it. Someone else survived it. My reply was simple. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt those words apply to me too. 4 months. That's how long it took for my life to shift from survival mode to something that actually resembled living. 4 months since I sent my mistake and watched an entire shaky family structure collapse like it was waiting for the slightest breeze. 4 months since I lay in a hospital bed, breath sour with anesthesia, realizing the nurse holding my hand was the only person in the room who cared if I opened my eyes. 4 months since I stopped pretending that being needed meant being loved. And the strangest part? I didn't miss them. Not the guilt texts, not the panicked calls, not the emotional gymnastics, not the constant expectation that I'd drop everything to fix the latest self-inflicted crisis. Instead, my days became mine. Quiet, soft, honest. My mornings were no longer dictated by who needs me, but by the much gentler, what do I want today? Sometimes it was simple, coffee in the turquoise chair. Sometimes ambitious, trying to make a mug in pottery class that didn't resemble a sad, collapsing volcano. Usually I failed, and I loved it. My phone barely buzzed anymore. And if it did, it wasn't someone demanding money or labor or emotional oxygen. It was my friend Maya from high school, or someone from work, or an appointment reminder. Normal things, adult things, not crisis sirens disguised as family. One morning at the farmer's market, I literally bumped into Maya, knocked my bag of apples right out of my hand. She helped me pick them up, then asked casually, "How's your family?" I didn't tense up, didn't flinch, didn't brace for impact. "They're where they belong," I said, "far away." She blinked, then nodded slowly. "I always wondered how you stayed so calm growing up, but now I get it. You weren't calm, you were surviving." The words landed in my chest like a key sliding into a lock. Because she was right. I spent years mistaking suppression for strength. Years thinking endurance was love. Years believing that if I just gave a little more, swallowed a little harder, smiled a little brighter, their emptiness would feel full. I journaled a lot during this time. Wrote things I'd never said out loud, even in therapy. Being needed is not the same thing as being valued. Carrying people is not the same as being loved. Forgiveness without accountability is just permission to hurt me again. Ugly truths. Necessary ones. Amber still tried to poke holes in my piece sometimes. She'd cycle through new numbers to text me from. Last week she sent, "You ruined my career. Happy now?" I looked at it while stirring cream into my coffee, and the wildest thing happened. I smiled. Because yes, I was happy. Not because her influencer sponsorships tanked, but because I finally stopped letting her siphon my life like a gas tank she didn't want to pay for. I was done. And done, it turns out, is not bitterness. Done is clarity. Done is rebirth. My apartment didn't magically become a sanctuary overnight, but it shifted, slowly, quietly, like it was exhaling with me. Every piece of furniture I replaced, every wall I repainted, every plant I brought home even though I absolutely knew I'd forget to water it. All of it felt like reclaiming square footage in my own life. The turquoise chair became my favorite place to sit. I swear it holds me better than half my family ever did. I'd curl up with my coffee in the mornings, sunlight pooling at my feet, and for the first time, my body wasn't bracing for the next emotional emergency explosion. I started journaling consistently. Some entries were soft, some were brutal. I was the scapegoat, not the support system. My silence was not consent. I wasn't asking too much. They were giving too little. The truth is freeing, but it cuts on the way out. Around this time, my mother and Amber started telling extended family that I was unstable, lashing out, having an emotional crisis. Classic playbook. Rewrite the history, recast themselves as saviors, stick me in the problem child role I never got to play when I actually was a child. My cousin Jane texted me one night, "Just so you know, they're saying you had a breakdown." I laughed so hard I snorted. A real, cathartic borderline unhinged laugh. "Let them talk," I typed back. "Let them build whatever story helps them sleep." Because here's the thing. I didn't need the last word anymore. I didn't need to convince anyone that I wasn't the villain in their imaginary script. Freedom means letting people be wrong about you without sprinting to correct them. One afternoon, I finally felt brave enough to open the old box under my bed. The one filled with letters, photos, birthday cards, tiny memories preserved out of obligation rather than joy. The kind of sentimental clutter you keep because it feels sinful to throw away. I sat on the floor and sifted through it all. Dad's handwriting on an old envelope. Amber at age 9 with missing teeth. Mom smiling in a way she doesn't anymore. A life I'd been dragging like a suitcase with a broken wheel. I kept 3 photos. Just 3. Then I stood up, walked outside, and put the rest in the dumpster. Not dramatically, not angrily, just decisively. It didn't feel like losing history. It felt like making room. By the time evening settled in and the apartment glowed with warm lamplight, I realized something huge. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I was afraid of going back, and I wouldn't. Ever. Because the final step, the thing that would close the door for good, was still coming. 4 months after everything blew up, Cabo, the surgery, the blocked numbers, I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind that comes after a fight, but the kind that settles when you stop carrying what was never yours. I sent my family one last message. I hope someday you realize what you lost, but even if you don't, I haven't lost myself. And that was it. The door shut. Life didn't magically transform. It just softened. I woke without dread. My phone stopped being an alarm system. I took pottery classes. I slept through the night. The turquoise sofa became a place to rest, not collapse. Amber still tried to break through. One new number texted, "You ruined my career." I felt nothing. Not anger, not guilt, just distance. Her world didn't fall apart because of me. It fell apart because I stopped being the net under it. Mom eventually stopped trying too. Manipulation doesn't work when the target stops participating. One evening, sitting by my window with a mug I'd made, crooked and imperfect, I realized something simple. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up. The nurse who held my hand showed up. The friend at the farmer's market showed up. Even Amber's ex, who messaged to say, "You made me feel less crazy," showed up. And finally, after years of shrinking to fit other people's needs, I showed up for myself. I used to think losing my family would break me, but I didn't lose anything. I just stopped bleeding for people who never planned to stop taking. The ride I needed never came, but I got home anyway, on my own. And that was the start of my real life.